Hello, Lindsay. How are you today?
Hey there, Aubrey. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. What are we getting into today on All
I'm going
Ears
to
English?
start with a question
Okay.
that definitely has to do with what we're talking about today. Would you rather be disappointed or disappointing? That's a toughie.
That's a tough question. I would say I hate to disappoint people. So I would rather be disappointed by someone else rather than be disappointing to someone else. Does
I'm
that
the
make sense?
same. Yep.
Yeah.
I am
Yes.
exactly the same. I would prefer someone else disappoint me. I would rather
Right.
be disappointed
That's another way to
than
say it.
be
Yeah.
disappointing.
Yeah. That's
It's
interesting,
funny when we
right?
talk about be disappointing, I mostly think about like parents. Like, am I a
Right.
disappointment to my parents? Am I disappointing to them?
Oh my gosh, there's
Nobody
nothing
wants
worse.
that.
I remember when I was growing up, it was the worst thing in the world, like, my dad's sign face of disappointment. He wouldn't, like, yell, he
Same.
wasn't a yeller, he wasn't a screamer, it was more like he just looked sad and disappointed, there's nothing worse.
Same, same. My dad was quiet, but if he ever said, "I'm disappointed in you," or just even in his face,
Yes.
you could just see the disappointment.
Yeah,
There's nothing
it's
worse. You wanted to make him
terrible.
proud of you.
Of course, of course. I feel like a lot of people would say, but maybe other people would have different opinions. Maybe we'll ask that in a question for a
Ooh.
poll today, right?
Yes, stick
Could be a
around till
good
the
question.
end. We'll share
Mhm.
the poll. You can find those in Spotify. We love when you guys answer our polls so that
Yes.
we can interact with you, find out your opinion about what we're chatting about here.
Yeah, we love that. So, guys, go ahead and hit follow right now, right here, wherever you are listening, so you don't miss a single episode of All Ears English. This is going to be a great one for anyone
Yes.
at the intermediate to advanced level B1, B2, C1. This episode is for you guys. Okay.
Right. We got a great question here about difficult grammar because these words disappointed, disappointing, we use them both as adjectives here, but they can also be participles, present or past participles. So they can be
Yes.
verbs. So what really is tricky, can be really confusing, is if you start to think of a word as just a verb or just an adjective, English is going to burn you because so
Gonna
many
burn
words
you.
can be a verb, an adjective, a noun. It gets complicated.
Right. So let's not get burned by these adjectives, right?
Right.
Let's do it right. And also, for my days, I'm sure for you too, for my days teaching English in New York and Japan, more so New York City, having students at that intermediate to advanced level, I got this question all the time. We worked on this stuff a lot. Very, very common. If you can nail this, it's going to be a big boost for your fluency, guys. Should I read the
Absolutely.
question then? Should I
Yes,
this
we have some pro tips today, such great advice, and this was all sparked by a very good question. Yeah, Lindsay, if you could read it,
Mhm.
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, this is a great question from Sebastian Alcaraz from Mexico. Here we go. Hey, good day, Lindsay and company. I hope you have a great day. Here's my question. I'm confused about adjectives ending with ed, adjectives ending with ing, the past simple ed, and the past continuous was plus ing. For example, I'm so tired after a long day at work. This example is an adjective ending with ed. I just heard the exciting news. Congratulations. This is an adjective ending with ing. Last year, he always played football on Saturdays. This is an example of past simple tense. Sam was eating popcorn at the movie theater. Right? Oh my gosh, Aubrey.
It's a
we
lot.
have
Yeah.
it's a lot. Where, when, and how can we use the ones mentioned above? I'm stuck and I'm trying to figure it out, but I can't. I don't know what to do. Hope you have a nice day. Thanks in advance, Sebastian Alcaraz from Mexico.
I
Nice.
love this question. Thank you for sending it, Sebastian. But I also really love reading where he's saying, I'm stuck, trying to figure it out. I don't know what to do, because this makes me feel like I'm so excited. We can help. We can break
Yeah.
this down, because this is the kind of thing that no amount of Googling would really make it simple and break it down
No.
for you. Whereas we can take this one quick episode, and by the end, you guys are going to be really clear on how to use these. I'm excited.
Exactly. Exactly. So we're going to break it down really clearly for you guys here. Let's start with why it's confusing.
Yeah,
Aubrey?
I think that helps. If you start to think of every word that ends in ed as a past tense verb, right? You see parked or jumped and you imagine, okay, past
Uh,
tense verb, then this will confuse you, because they can also be adjectives, words that
yes.
end in ed. They're called participial adjectives.
Yes. Yes.
Or also ing words, right? If you think of words that end in ing as verbs, no, they can be adjectives, they can be nouns as gerunds. So this
Mm,
is one trap that learners fall into is to target that ed and ing and feel like, oh, that's a verb, not
Right.
necessarily.
And it seems like we could end up in that trap if we're not looking at the context, right?
Exactly. That's exactly
Right.
right. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, like I said, these are participial adjectives. The
Mhm.
kind of a tricky word to say. What that means is they're in the same form as a past participle or a present participle, which is that past tense verb, right?
Mhm.
So, Sebastian used a couple examples here, and he said, this is a past simple, a verb in past simple tense, right?
Mhm.
Played football, and he's showing that this can be confusing if it's also used as an adjective.
Yeah.
Now, not every word can be a participial adjective, right? There
Okay.
is quite a list. There are
Mhm.
hundreds, but it's not every verb. So that makes it tricky too. You can't take the verb played and turn that into an adjective, right? Played or
Mm.
playing, that one doesn't exist as an adjective, but there are a lot of participles that are also adjectives.
All right. So let's give some examples and compare a few. Shall we go
Yes,
into it, Aubrey?
absolutely. Yeah, so
Yes.
we're gonna start with ed, words that end in ed, and
Okay.
then we're separating and we'll go into ing next.
All right. Okay. So shall I give the example first for the first one? The
Yeah, so
ED verb?
we're talking about these ed verbs that can be adjectives. So let's
Mhm.
first start with the examples of verbs, right? Sentences that have a
Yes.
verb that ends
Yes.
in ed. These are in simple past. They're
All
past
right.
participles.
Okay, here we go. So the lesson bored him. So verb, right? To bore, to be bored.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Here,
Mhm.
bored is a verb. It's in simple past tense.
Mhm.
The lesson is doing the action. It is boring him. The lesson bored him.
Right. Right. Simple past tense. Or he surprised her when he showed up. Okay. So surprised is the verb in the simple past, right?
Exactly.
Mhm.
Now, we use these when we're talking about actions in the past, but
Mhm.
both of these participles, bored and surprised, can also be adjectives, adjectives
Mm.
that end in ed. Now,
Yes.
these generally describe emotions. They tell us how people feel. So we're
Right.
going to take these exact two sentences and change them so that now that participle is used as an adjective. Give us the
Right.
first one, Lindsay.
Yeah, and before we do that, I would just say this is linked to what we talked about at the beginning of the show. Disappointed, right? My dad was disappointed. That was the worst thing to see that
Exactly.
disappointed face. So here it is. I was bored during the lesson.
Right. So
Or
here, bored is an adjective. It's
Mhm.
describing me, right? Was
Yeah,
is a linking verb. Bored is an adjective. So you can see
nice.
how the lesson bored him. Oh, it's a verb there. I was bored. Now
Mm,
it's an adjective
so
describing me and how I feel.
emotion. I like how you highlighted that. Emotions, how we feel, how we react to something, like the
Right. It's always going
result.
to describe a person when a participial adjective is used in a sentence.
Right. Or
So it has
when
to be an emotion, how something feels, a person
how
or an
something
animal.
feels, and usually an emotion is a result of something else. So it's like a response to something most of the time, right?
Exactly, right? So
Mhm.
the lesson is boring you. You were bored. You
Yeah.
are bored by the lesson.
Or the noise surprised you. You were surprised by the noise,
Exactly.
right? So
So if
she
you
was
say,
surprised when he showed up, right? He
she was
surprised her.
surprised when he
Mhm.
showed up. Now, surprised is a participial adjective,
Mhm.
ends in ed, but it's an adjective describing her. She was surprised.
Yes. All right. Okay, Aubrey, let's go into the other side. Let's flip over to the ing verbs and the
Yes.
adjectives that also you find ing in there. So let's do it.
Exactly. And everything's very similar as ed. These just end in
Mhm.
ing. So we have verbs that end in ing. These are also participles, but they're either present or past continuous. So
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
example, give us the first one,
All right,
Lindsay.
here we go. He was annoying her with his passive aggressive behavior. All right. So, there you go.
Annoying is a verb here, right? He was
Mhm.
annoying her. He is
Yes.
doing this action. So annoy is
Yeah.
a verb. It can be an action.
Okay. Or what's the next one? Disappointed? We're going back to the
Yes, she
Mhm.
disappointed her parents when she broke curfew. Here
Yep.
it's used as a verb. It's an action
Mhm.
she's doing. She is disappointing someone.
Okay, now let's look at adjectives where we use the same core of the word, but totally different
Exactly,
participants.
it's the same participle, but now it's a participial adjective. It's used as an adjective, ends in ing, and
Mhm.
these always describe the thing that causes the emotion. So it's not going to describe a person, it's going to describe whatever that is, the lesson, the
Okay.
thing that causes a person to feel that emotion.
Okay, important difference between what we said, how a person
Yes,
feels at the top when we talked about the ED, surprised, bored, different, right?
exactly. So a
Mhm.
boring lesson makes you feel bored, right?
Right.
The thing here is the lesson. That's what's causing the emotion.
Exactly. All right, so should I give the first example for this
Yeah, so
ing
these are
one?
the same two examples where we had the verb. Now we'll have them with the adjective, same word.
Okay, that noise is really annoying, right? Okay.
Yes. So instead of, the annoying noise, and there it's an adjective, right? That noise
Mhm.
is really annoying.
All right, or her parents told her that her actions were disappointing. Oh, the worst.
Exactly, right? And here we have disappointing as an adjective. So it's
Yes.
interesting how the meaning is really the same. It's just how you say it, right? If you diagram a sentence, it's like, okay, she disappointed her parents. Disappointed's a verb.
Yes.
Her actions were disappointing. Ooh, disappointing's an adjective. Same
Mhm.
word.
Yes. For our listeners, I have a suspicion that many of them have had this lesson before, right? We've taught this lesson over years and years. We've heard it, but Aubrey, how can we solidify? I think this may be something that doesn't seem to catch on, that for some reason we're not able to get traction
It
with
is. I mean, it's
this.
complicated, right? You guys might
Yeah.
wanna listen to this whole discussion again, come back to the blog so you have it written out, but we have a pro tip that might really help solidify this in your brain. And this is an Aubrey Carter original. I came up with this.
I love it.
So it may not be perfect, but I kind of like it. Here's
Love
my
it.
pro tip. Ing for things and ed for Fred. Like Fred's the name of a person,
Okay.
right? So if it's an adjective that ends in ing, that's going to
Mhm.
be describing a thing that causes an emotion. And
Okay.
then ed, if it ends in ed for Fred, ed is going to describe how a person
Uh,
feels, a person's
mm.
emotions or feelings.
I love that. I love
Kind of
that.
fun,
That's good. Love the pro tips, especially when they're originals. So
right?
good.
I
Guys,
know. I
so
was like,
write
what
that
can I
one
do that
down.
has some alliteration that'll be, a good memory
Yes.
trick? Ing for things and ed for Fred.
Love it. Guys, write that down. Now let's get into a role play because this is really the context we need, right? To start to look at the words not as just words on a list, but in the context of what are we even talking about here? Who's feeling
Exactly.
something? What's the thing that's getting impacted? Okay. Or
Right.
did
How does
someone
this work
just
in a
do something?
conversation?
Yeah. Yeah. So, what are we doing in this conversation?
So here you and I are discussing our homework. Maybe we're college students here.
Okay.
And we're going to use new participial adjectives because there are hundreds. So these
Yeah.
are ones that we haven't covered yet in the episode.
All right. Here we go. So,
All right, I'll
go
start
for
us
it.
out.
Okay.
I'm confused. Are you confused?
Yes. These instructions are so confusing.
It's an interesting class, but the homework is so frustrating.
Exactly. The lesson really interested me, but then the teacher confused me when he explained his homework, the homework.
Yes, it really frustrated me when he was unclear.
Oh, yes. So many
Okay, so
words.
the first half of the role play, all adjectives. And then the
Okay.
second half are all verbs. So let's go through. Hopefully that will help you guys as you listen to the sentences here.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah, this is another way to break it up, right? So I'm confused. Again, adjective, right?
Exactly. I'm describing my emotions, how I feel. I'm confused. And then I ask you, are you confused? Both of
Yeah.
these are adjectives ending in ed.
And then another kind of adjective ending in ing. I said, yes, these instructions are confusing. Okay. So it's the
Right,
thing
exactly.
that's making me feel confused, right?
Exactly. Ing for things, right? What's
Ing for
confusing?
things.
The instructions. So
Mm-hmm.
adjectives describe nouns, and
Mm-hmm.
here confusing isn't an emotion. You could never say I feel confusing.
No.
That wouldn't really make sense. That would then you'd say like I am being confusing. Sorry, that's
Yeah, and the
but
and
go ahead.
I was gonna say the famous kind of mistake that can lead to laughter, right, is when you say, "I'm boring," right, instead of "I'm bored."
Yes,
Right.
exactly. If you accidentally say I'm boring or I'm not
Something like that.
interesting when you
Right.
mean to say I'm not interested, right?
Right.
That's what then when you need this ing for things, ed for Fred, right? Don't
You
use
want
ing verbs or
Yes.
ing adjectives to describe how you feel. That will be incorrect.
Exactly. Alright, let's keep going. So you said then it's what? It's
Yeah, so I use two more adjectives ending in ing here. It's an interesting class, but the homework is so frustrating. So
Mhm.
these are describing things. The class is interesting, the homework is frustrating.
Right. Okay, and here now we're going to verbs, right? So I
Exactly.
said, exactly. The lesson interested me. And this is an interesting use of interest as a verb. I would tend not to use this quite as much, right? In this way, but it makes sense and it works. Interest is a verb to draw my interest.
Exactly. To draw my interest or to interest me. But you're right. Native English speakers often would instead say,
Drew my
the
interest.
lesson was interesting instead of
Right.
saying, the lesson interested me.
Or
It
we could give
is,
our listeners as a bonus another option. The lesson really caught my interest. Caught my
yes.
interest. Mhm.
Drew my interest or caught my interest. You're right. It's interesting how it's interesting. We'll change that. It just sort of
For
sounds
some
more
reason.
native
Yeah.
to use like a more informal verb.
Yeah. I mean, you can do it. It's correct. It's just not very natural for some reason
Sounds a
to
little
say
more
that in the
formal.
past tense.
A little more
Right.
formal than
Mhm.
than what you would use in daily conversations.
For sure. And then I said, "But then the teacher confused me when he explained the homework." Just simple past verbs.
Yeah, and
Okay?
this is where it does get tricky when if you're trying to break down a sentence and it's like, "Okay, the teacher confused me." Oh, is that an adjective? I'm talking about how I felt. I was confused. But
Yeah.
in this sentence, if you look at it, the teacher is doing the action. The teacher is confusing someone. The teacher confused me.
So it's
So
a verb.
this I think we should dive into a pro tip here. We just had that one last one, frustrated me as a past tense verb. Again,
Mhm.
it really frustrated me when he was unclear. It's
Right.
still a verb in this sentence. It's what the teacher
Right.
was doing, right? The
Right.
lesson frustrated me. But what can really be confusing is if you're trying to diagram sentences, these are difficult. It's difficult to look at confused and okay, is it being used as a verb or an adjective there? And
Yeah.
that doesn't really help your fluency.
Mm. So what's the answer, Aubrey? What should be our connection mindset? How do we I mean, we're not diagramming sentences anymore, right? We're
Right.
not in school anymore, thank goodness.
Right. If your goal
So
is fluency, you want to do what is going to give you the most benefit. And
yeah.
instead of trying to figure out if a word is a verb or an adjective in a sentence, though that is interesting for, just to know and for grammar teachers, is it helping you move toward your goal?
Of what?
So,
Of connection, right?
of
Of connection.
connection,
Ultimately,
right?
fluency, connection. Exactly. Yes. And
Yes.
so what
So a
do we
lot
do?
of these, as you listen to us talk about these, one will sound correct because you're taking in a lot of English. You're
Mhm.
hearing these adjectives and verbs used correctly. So the main thing to keep in mind is that very common error that you were talking about, Lindsay, is
Mhm.
accidentally describing yourself or describing a person's emotions with a word that ends in ing and saying like,
Yes.
I'm not interesting or I'm boring. That's a
Yeah.
mistake you want to avoid. That's unclear and you're
Mhm.
accidentally saying something unkind about yourself, and that's not what you mean.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I love this. This has been a really good breakdown of the differences here, right? Now, your job, guys, is to go out into the world, listen to English, and then identify when are we seeing a verb, when are we seeing an adjective with the ed or with the ing. Then we can start to use these and produce them correctly, right?
Absolutely. Yes, this is a
Love it.
lot. I read that question. It's such a good question. Like you said, Lindsay, so many of our
Yeah.
students have this question, and it is one of the most confusing things about English. So, a
Hmm.
couple of pro tips here. Definitely don't see a word that ends in ed and think, past tense verb, 100%,
Right,
no other
right, right,
option.
right, right.
That's
Yeah,
not
don't
the
be
case.
robotic in the way you think. Look at it in context. It's
Right.
all about the situation. Good stuff, Aubrey. We are going to come back. We're going to do lots of good grammar stuff this year in 2024. So, guys, hit that follow button on All Ears English to get every single episode we publish. All right.
Awesome. Thanks,
Good
Lindsay. I will see
stuff.
you next time.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.